This is the 3D Pod, your number one source for 3D printing news, analysis, and insight from 3dprint.com. Now, here are your hosts, Joris Peels and Maxwell Bogue.
Hi everyone, my name is Joris Peels, and this is another episode of the 3D Pod. And with me, as always, is Maxwell Vogue. Hey Max, how you doing?
I'm good, Joris. How you doing today?
I'm okay. My voice is a bit short because I am at AM Forum in Berlin, and I spent 2 days talking to everyone. And so yeah, I can't. My voice is gone to hell, but apart from that, everything's okay.
How's the AM forum going?
Oh, it was good. It was a good event. I had a sustainability panel, went really well, and besides that, I met a lot of people and a lot of new people for me, and so it's a really good event. I really liked it. About 800 people, mostly industry, nearly everyone in the industry. Not a lot of like shop floor people, not a lot of super management people, kind of the everybody in between kind of. And yeah, it was really helpful. A lot of good technical discussions. So I'm really happy with that.
That's cool. And who do we have on the podcast today?
Today, we're going to be jumping down into the wonderful, exciting world of 3D printed construction. And essentially, like what we're
Finally.
going to be finally, we've looked at 3D we've looked at 3D printing construction in a long time. And the reason I think we haven't had a lot of people with 3D printing construction on here is it's because it's a jungle out there. And the reason for that is that it's a new market and everything's new, so we don't have that many established companies. We don't really know where it's going. We have a lot of people who are super optimistic and have no reservations, and 3D printing construction is going to conquer the world. And we've been a bit reticent in having a lot of construction people on. But I was really captivated what our guest is doing. Our guest today is Natalie Wadley, and she's a part of Changemaker 3D. They're a UK-based company. Their idea really is to build a lot of 3D printed stuff, but not only houses. And they're really looking at 3D printing, for example, infrastructure and casements and all sorts of other kind of things. And they're also kind of looking at this from a kind of like how to help people and how to implement this technology kind of way. So they have a different kind of, they're not selling a machine, they're trying to get projects and they're trying to get things built. So I thought that was really interesting, and I really love what they were doing at Changemaker. So I thought that Natalie would make a really good guest. So welcome to the show, Natalie.
Thank you very much, both of you. It's brilliant to be part of the podcast, and thank you for the intro. I think it's, as you say, it's a really exciting emerging space, one that we're super passionate about, and really good to be able to talk to you about some of the work we're doing in the UK, and particularly focusing on, like you say, where we can have the most sustainable impact, where we see the technology really being able to add value, and also how we can help tackle equality as well. How we can get local people trained up in skills and jobs of the future, which is a huge opportunity right now in the UK.
So first off, like you guys, you guys come at this kind of from a kind of more idealistic kind of bent. I think at least initially. I think would that be fair to say that, or?
Yeah. So as you said, we're coming at this as an integrator of the technology. So my husband and I set up the business back just over 5 years ago, really because we were super excited about the sustainability and the social impact that the technology can have. And across housing as well, we spent the first couple of years really exploring what could be done in the UK from a housing point of view. The market wasn't quite ready then. We probably weren't quite ready, but definitely saw there was huge potential for housing. And then that took us through into infrastructure. It gave us an opportunity to pivot into rail, road and water. And we've spent the last couple of years in rail and water industry, particularly, really figuring out which technology application, whether it's gantry, whether it's mobile robots, the different types of materials that are available, and specializing in on a couple of key technology providers to figure some of that out initially.
What are the more promising areas that you guys, or that you've come away with from all of this? Is it concrete? So, is it just pouring concrete essentially, or are we doing something even more?
The opportunity in infrastructure is to support productivity. Firstly, that's the real problem point sustainable productivity. How can we get two of those things aligned? Previously it's you compromise productivity for sustainability or vice versa. And actually what we're seeing is that this technology, the 3D construction printing, has the potential, and it's not fully there yet, and it won't be for several years, but it has the potential to bring together the sustainable benefits and the productivity. Can we print quicker? Can we print with less material? Can we reduce steel reinforcement? Could we minimize waste? Can we make sure that we think about the end of life as well, the recycling element of that asset? So all of those things we've been really working really hard over the last couple of years with our clients to answer those questions and to find where that best fit is. And that's where Print for Structure was born. So Print for Structure is our trademark. It's the service that we provide to the UK to deliver 3D concrete printing solutions, really. So whatever the required function might be, whether it's, we've focused mostly on the mobile robots to date, but we're seeing huge uptick in the gantry market as well. That's looking really exciting.
So first off, okay, talk to us about this mobile versus gantry, because one is essentially like a robot arm that comes to the construction site, and the other is a gantry site or a gantry kind of installation that could be a construction site, it could be somewhere else, and essentially there's a third variant, which is one of those two, and then but it's actually off-site, right? And you transport the object to the site. So talk us through these variants. Why would you pick one, or what's the difference between one and the other?
Well, our approach as a business has been to look at this really holistically. So when you work with the client, it's not just focusing in on, okay, what is the asset? Is it a retaining wall? Is it a chamber of some sort? What is it that needs to be printed? But we take a step back and say, okay, what is it being used for? What are the constraints of that construction site? What challenges do the general contractors face? Is it how quickly they need to get materials to site? Is it that they don't want as many lorries coming to and from that site? There's all sorts of allied factors that we take into consideration. And it's that decision matrix that helps to inform whether it's an on-site or an off-site print. And what I would say is that, there's definitely assets where it's already efficient, it's already working well. The precast market has spent many years really getting very effective at doing what it does, and we're not here to necessarily go head to head with precast. I think that's one of the things we would say. It's about finding the added value assets where it might be complex geometries, for example. There might be lots of formwork that needs to happen on site that starts to take time, or it starts to add in lots of cost. And that's where you would then say, well, actually, there is some value in coming to site printing with a mobile robot or a gantry. And I think your second point about, why would you choose gantry or mobile robot? Again, part of that comes down to the asset you're printing. You're not realistically going to want to take a gantry robot to site with the setup times, the costs and things associated for quite a low value asset. So you want to be doing something that it makes commercial sense to deploy all of that technology to site, and it adds value to the overall program for the end client. But definitely, we're watching the 3D housing market globally with real interest about how the gantry technology is really evolving, how the materials are really evolving, and we're seeing more and more refinement coming out in that space that we think we can start to deploy into the UK in the coming months and years.
And is it because gantry to me sounds automatically perhaps better suited to really much larger objects, because at one point, you're going to have a lot of give on that arm, or you're going to reach the maximum load capacity of that arm. It just seems like gantry could be much better if you're really printing something huge. But then again, you could put a robot on a rail, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this is why the technology is so cool, because you really can do so many different things with it. I would agree with you. Gantry if you're printing something larger, like a house or like a large, infrastructure item, large chambers, whatever that might be, then you want to have this, the footprint, the plate, the build plate, if you will, that allows for that to be printed either in one entire structure or in one or two component parts in that overall gantry system. The other side of gantry, which is quite interesting, is actually if you've got a lot of the same product that needs to be printed, there's nothing to actually stop the company from having a production line, within the gantry as well. And having a process whereby you might be printing several smaller parts for that site, but it's quicker and easier to just set up once and print several times. Now, we've not done that ourselves, but we can definitely see where there would be some circumstances where that would be certainly interesting as an approach.
Can you give us some examples of what you guys have completed, if you can? I don't know what's private, what's public, but
No, that's fine. So we've been able to sort of publicly share over the last 18 months 2 of our projects in the UK rail and water industry. So with a large water company called United Utilities, which are in the northwest of England, and we've printed a wastewater chamber, so part of the sewage, the dirty water process cycle in the UK. We've been able to look at printing a fairly small chamber in terms of, what can certainly the sizes they can go up to in that industry. And we've also printed retaining walls on site for High Speed 2, which is Europe's largest rail infrastructure project. And we've been printing temporary walls with them. So we've had a really good opportunity of printing, both permanent structures like chambers and temporary structures like walls. And for both of those, we've collaborated with and utilised Cybe Construction for both their robots and their material.
And what was the reason to 3D print these versus using a traditional method? Was there an advantage that attracted
Yeah. So the advantage with the water chamber was that we could actually take quite a lot of steps out of the construction process. So it was quite manual. You had to build the base slab, then you'd get the precast walls, then you'd send people inside the chamber and they'd be putting in different shuttering to create different sections of the chamber. So there was people working in confined space. There were more steps in the process. And with the design that we were able to take forward, we could print the wall in one structure, which did away with the need for people working in confined spaces, and also with speeding the process up as well. So Cybe actually printed that in the Netherlands on our behalf because it was just coming out of COVID, and international travel and things was still limited, and they printed it. I think it was in about 3.5 hours. So there's definite advantages there to taking forward that concept, and we're going to continue to innovate and develop out those water chamber use cases in the near future in the water industry. And then likewise with rail, it's really looking at, there's so many retaining walls that are required across industry, in all sorts of construction, that it seemed like a really sensible place to start with. Can we print on site? Is it quicker or more efficient to have robots printing on site, and trying to reduce down some of the additional work that might happen with with formwork essentially. And these are very much beginning stages for us. These are clients who very much are keen to innovate and keen to support the innovations and understand how to gain more efficiencies and more benefits from the process as we go forward.
Let's talk a little bit about these advantages, like just general. Well, I like first off the temporary structures. Like, is that a big thing? This temporary structures, printing temporary structures, is this an easy thing for you guys to get started with, or is there just this whole temporary structures through like 3D printing thing that I completely didn't know about? Think about like printing temporary structures. Like, why would that be advantageous? That's really interesting.
So 2 things. One, temporary works have, in some cases, they have lower design standard requirements, different life expectancy, different performance criteria, which are seen to be lower risk items to start working on. So really, it's about de-risking the technology, and starting with temporary structures is in some industries is the right place to start. And very often, the enabling works, or the temporary works as it's referred to, can be very, very expensive and can take a large proportion of time on the program before you even get to the permanent work that you're there to do in the first place. So there is a real opportunity, globally, but particularly we're seeing in the UK, for print infrastructure to support the efficiencies of temporary works.
Okay, and then another thing that's related to that, of course, is then form work, right? Because so vaguely,
Yeah.
I know nothing about construction. Vaguely, this is like the wood stuff that they make beforehand to pour the concrete in, right? Essentially, or
Yeah, you have to create, a case, if you will, to house the concrete when it's poured. And that's either typically in the UK, that's done in a couple of ways. It's either done off-site in a precast mould, or it's done on site with wood shuttering or similar. Those shutterings and things are often disposed of. They're no longer needed. So you've got the need to, you can potentially look at reducing some waste there as well, and cost and time. I don't think it's, as I say, I wouldn't want to sit here today and say we've got the most efficient, cost-effective model. Of course, we don't, but we do have a lot more understanding and a lot more insight now around where we can start to add value in that process.
but it's often cited. I mean, when we look at these things, so first of all, let's talk a little bit about this costing thing, because I think it's important, because a lot of people see these videos like we 3D printed a house in 24 hours for $10,000 and that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of people are
Yeah.
getting a wrong impression here. But typically, we could say that on this form work, that's one of the areas where there are huge cost advantages potentially, right?
I agree with you that we need to be as transparent as we can about, as an industry, as a 3D industry, about reporting costs and advantages, and also be transparent about where there are still challenges as well, and where there are things that are do need to improve. I don't know. I can't really comment on sort of what other people put out there, to be honest, about their own projects, because I don't have enough detail on them. But I do think that there is a lot around the process that still takes time. We still had to take time to set up the robot. We still had to take time to, in this instant with the retaining walls, we had to have base slabs, and they were traditionally manufactured. And you still have to allow the time for the concrete and things to dry. So even though it sets, the side beam mortar is very, very quick setting, if you have to do reinforcements or things like that, there are costs and time associated with that. But what you hope for overall is that you reduce down the overall construction process, because you've made those marginal gains across lots of little areas on the process.
A friend of mine works in construction in the UK, and I think the average age of the construction work in the UK every year gets older. I think it's somewhere around like 49 or 50 years old at the moment, or something like this, somewhere around that time. And so, is that workforce thing? You did mention it. That is a huge issue for you guys, right?
Huge. So we had a recent stat come out on this, that we need 25,000 new people into the industry by 2030. And you're absolutely right, that aging workforce, with the speed in which we can bring new young people in, is a real challenge for us in the UK. And that's where our social value goals as a business come in, because we want to be developing our skills program for the UK. We want to be able to offer digital construction, 3D construction printing, as a recognised qualification and as a recognised job role, a digital greener job role that we can create excitement around in the industry. And it'll do, our hope is that it does two things. One, we really want to diversify our workforce. We really want more women, more underrepresented groups to connect with the industry. That's the first thing. And I'm very much a champion of women in construction and diversity in the workplace. So that's hugely important that we support that cause and make some inroads in that area. And secondly, this is, sometimes we get questioned about, am I going to lose my job because all the robots are coming to site? And I think that what we're really trying to educate people on is where we do have people in the industry, where we can redeploy them, or where we can get robots to do some of the labor that doesn't need to be done by a human, then let's make the most of that. Let's really bring humans and robots together on construction sites of the future and have that kind of probiotic workspace. And, we're in a digital generation. Our young people are first and foremost digital driven. So the fact that they can get involved with digital construction, we really, really hope that will start to inspire them in a different way about the industry.
Just one thing, like when you mentioned qualification, right? In the UK, that's like it's not just a random term, right? It's literally like it's like a official job thing, right? It's like a official job grade or a job thing you can get, right, or something like that.
We want to develop that. So at the moment, we don't have a qualification for 3D construction printing. It's something that we as a company want to start to take forward with industry partners who can help us to develop those qualifications and then start to deliver them alongside existing apprenticeships or as modules within apprenticeships in the UK.
So you do some house stuff, right? Probably that because that's what everybody wants and everybody talks about. Or do you really see that the house printing also has a huge future?
I think so. We started our journey as a business with housing. We spent the first couple of years really working to understand what could be designed and printed in the UK. Again, collaboratively with Cybe and our UK partners, Automatatio and Bailey Garner and Constructure. And we got really far down the road. We got the house design, we understood the pricing, we understood where we needed to go with that. But we ran into the beginning of COVID, and that just meant that we had to, the people that were coming to the table to help with that project, were just not in a position, in the housing space. They just weren't in a position to take. It was the wrong time. It became the wrong time, and COVID impacted that massively. But it's very, very much still part of our future vision that we will move back into the housing space, and not just permanent housing, but looking at the other end of the spectrum around homelessness as well, and creating temporary solutions. We do have a housing need in the UK. Typically 300,000 homes are needed, to map that shortfall. And, that means that there are people living, without homes or inadequate homes. So we do still have those challenges, and we're very passionate still about finding a way back into that market to create some impact. And I think globally we're just super proud of the whole sector, really. Every week there's a new building being printed, or a new home that one of the leading companies is taking forward. And yes, they're still in early stages. Yes, there will be things that need to evolve, but they're out there doing it. They're out there innovating, they're out there being passionate, they're trying to find a better, more sustainable solution for housing. And I really, really commend them for that, because we know just how hard that is.
Okay, that's good. But then the more sustainable solution points to what Max asked earlier. Like, okay, but concrete itself is
Yeah.
okay, it's wondrous, right? It's a wondrous material, but at the same time, it's also terrible, right?
Like a third of the carbon footprint or something of that nature, right? Is the production of concrete.
It's a fair question. It's a question that the industry asks a lot as well. And you're right, that we're seeing a huge shift across not just 3D concrete printing materials, but concrete manufacturers, material providers as a whole are now, in a real race to low carbon, lower carbon materials. So there's a shift towards, there's an understanding that concrete isn't going away. For all the reasons you said at the beginning, it is actually a very durable product, and it does what it needs to do in major infrastructure. But I think the question is, how do we do that with a lighter footprint? How do we do that more sustainably, more locally, more ethically? And for us as a company, our selection process of using materials that we work with is that they have to demonstrate lower carbon credentials. They have to be considered a lower carbon material. The material we've used with Cybe up to this point, it doesn't have Portland cement in it. So it's a more sustainable material, if you will, from that point of view. And then there's the second point around where you do have to use it. Okay, well, let's just use as little as possible, and that's where we get the opportunity to design and print exactly where you need. So the aim with that is that you use less material. And also, can we design out using steel? Steel reinforcement. If we've seen with the water chamber that we were able to reduce some of the steel reinforcement within that, and that obviously and steel is a massive contributor of carbon. For us, it's about looking at the holistic approach to sustainability. It's the steel, it's the concrete, it's how much we're using, it's being mindful of the material credentials in the first place. And it's also being really mindful of what happens to that product at the end of its life cycle as well. How reusable is it? Can those retaining walls be redeployed to another site, or can we recycle them down into local aggregate to be utilised in the future? So, we take that very, very centrally into all of our thinking and design process.
I get there's different types of concrete, and are you guys, for printing concrete, do you have to use some specialized formulation, or is it really just kind of an off-the-shelf material?
No, it's not off the shelf, and that's why we're seeing a lot of focus in the 3D construction space on lots of new materials coming into the market, because they do have to be quite specialized. They have to set quickly, but without curing too quickly, without cracking or without slumping. So there is a very much a material science element in that. We don't manufacture material ourselves at this point, but we certainly work with our delivery partners, our supply partners, on understanding which are the most suitable materials, not just from a sustainability point of view, but also from a UK compliance point of view with standards. How comparative are these materials with traditional concrete strengths, for example, so that we can draw some comparisons and help to, you talked about barriers earlier. One of the biggest barriers is that our 3D construction space isn't regulated as yet. So, we're looking to other design standards like existing concrete codes or similar to be able to point towards as a reference for how we're designing. And that's something that understandably the industry is taking, certainly in the UK, is really taking its time to be very thorough and get comfortable with that as a new material and a new process.
What I just think is really fascinating, it's always fascinated me, is the fact that we have the Romans used concrete, right? And they use quicklime in it or something like this, or they're a little bit different than we do or something. And they have concrete structures that last for thousands of years.
And no rebar.
No, and also, but that just, and apparently people didn't really understand this until recently or something like that. Can't we just do Roman concrete and have all this stuff last a lot longer, or does that not work, or I don't know. It's very naive maybe, but...
No idea. That's beyond my pay grade, that one.
Fair enough.
Okay. And it also fascinates me, given how big harmful concrete is in often cases, and how giant this industry is, there's no real alternative. Like there's aircrete, I think, which is like this material that you could form into bricks, lighter and all this kind of stuff. There's some, but there's nobody to, there's all these startups being funded, like, payments for left-handed people or whatever, and nobody's saying like, let's fund a startup for a complete alternative to concrete. Let's disrupt the concrete market.
I think that's a brilliant challenge to anybody out there listening, really, about what could be done. I mean, we're seeing in the 3D material space, there are companies out there who are looking at using like hemp, for example, to go into the material. We're seeing companies using recycled aggregates going in, which is, again, it doesn't change that it's concrete, but it's a more it begins its life more sustainably. And we are seeing, that there is an interest in bringing in different types of materials into the concrete mix itself, which can hopefully aim to reduce some of the less environmentally friendly aspects of the concrete process. And I think the concrete industry is recognizing in itself that there is no option really. We have to look more sustainably at the material process overall.
I'm just wondering, like, okay, if we look at this process, like, how do you Because if I was a regulator looking at and doing building safety, and all of a sudden somebody came with some crazy new process, I wouldn't exactly be like clamoring like, "Yay, let's do this." I mean, how do you convince like these regulators, like and there's local ones and national ones, right? How do you convince them, or what do you have to do to convince them to kind of like to trust this new technology?
Really, you have to go through the design process, and then you have to go through a full scale build and testing and verification. There is no shortcut to it. There in the UK, in our experience, and that's where our clients have supported us with innovation funding to do that, to design and print and test and validate the material, and not just the material, but the product itself that we've designed. So we've had testing done on walls, and we've done product testing on the chambers. Can they hold water, for example? Do they do what we designed them to do? And it's really giving people the real world experience to see the product and to verify it and test it. And in our experience, I don't know too much about other product acceptance globally, but I know in the UK that really is the only route to getting this through, is building the industry trust through doing, really.
Yeah, I think that is true. I mean, I used to live in Eindhoven, and it's a city in Holland. We're kind of really careful with all these regulations and these things. And we had a parking garage at the airport kind of partially collapse because of like some miscalculations in load bearing, and it was some new type of concrete. So it does happen, right? It can happen, this kind of stuff. So I do think it's good that they're being a bit difficult and they're being like kind of like really careful with this before people like kind of rush in this, And the other thing is like what most of what we've seen so far is kind of single story. How are you going to do multi-story, or isn't that even like a really something you're really clamoring for or not?
I think on your first point about standards, you're absolutely right. I mean, as frustrating as it is, we're a startup. We want to run fast. We want to get to the point of, scaling this up and seeing the benefits of it, and getting it out there as business as usual. But we balance that with the need for safety, and that's absolutely first and foremost. And the British safety culture is world class. For that reason, that the way that we undertake construction on sites, the way that we build products and take the time to check them, is ultimately about people's safety, in not just in the construction, but in the use of whatever it is that's being put together as well. And I completely stand by that. If it takes us 2 years to go through a process that then means we can roll out, then fine. At least we know that it's been really, really robustly checked and verified by the industry. And your second point about size, I mean, we're looking at this. We're looking out at the industry really with interest as well. We're starting to see some, 2-story building, houses going up in America and Europe. And I think Cobod did a house in Germany, I believe.
Yeah, they announced that a couple of
2-story.
weeks ago or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's definitely happening. And I think that what we're really seeing, and I think what we're about to see over the next 2 or 3 years, is a massive acceleration of the technology capability. I think the companies that are building the robots have been doing this now for quite a few years, and they're getting to refine the process as well, and they're getting to a really exciting point in the adoption of the technology and the innovation around it. So we're super excited about it, and I think that it's only going to get more efficient and more accessible from here on in. So I've got no doubt that we'll be going, the industry will go beyond 2 stories, and the buildings will get bigger, and they'll get more exciting in terms of their architectural, scope as well. I think that's another really interesting point about the tech, is we get a design freedom that we don't get with so much with other technologies or other design build processes. And it's what can that freedom, unlock for the future of housing and the way that people choose to live and function within their homes as well. So I think it's a hugely exciting area.
Okay, please don't tell the architects, because I'm like, I'm like, I'm really worried about all these architects coming up with these kind of like Jetsons kind of like structures, and that don't make sense. They just look really futuristic. Because don't we want the house of the future? Isn't the most logical shape for these things just like a self-supporting kind of like dome? Isn't that what we
Just
want, really?
or a cube. It's just a
I think
cube,
there's a
George.
just. I think you're right, and I think that there's going to be, as you know, as always, there's going to be those real icon statements where it's going to be the wow factor on it. But you're right, to get this technology out to the people who need housing the most, yeah, it needs to be simple, it needs to be efficient, it needs to be accessible, printed quickly, get in and live in it quickly. Safety has to be first and foremost in there. Yeah, I agree with you that there's a place and time for the architects to go crazy, and there's a place and time for us to say, okay, let's just get people into homes because that's what they need.
Yeah, I just think it would be really much better if we just thought of actual like the practicality of it rather than come up with some whiz bang design, especially if you want to make affordable housing. But the one thing I'm
Yeah,
super excited about is this infrastructure thing because
yeah,
we had a huge boom in Europe after the Marshall Plan, after the Second World War. Everything was destroyed, and or not everything, depending on which country. And there was a huge building boom, right? Of affordable houses and a
mm,
lot of infrastructure, a lot of bridges, and a lot of these affordable apartments and stuff have been taken down or replaced by other housing. Then there were
yeah,
successive booms in like the 70s and 80s where everybody was building these utopia housing estates from Le Corbusier and all these guys, and that didn't work. So these were taken down as well. But there's still a ton of this infrastructure everywhere. There's hundreds of bridges, hundreds of like all sorts of casements, all sorts of water infrastructure. But that's all crumbling, right? That's all. A lot of this stuff is end of life, right?
we take the infrastructure opportunity really seriously. That's why we're focusing so closely on it in our own business, because there's a massive opportunity for this technology to play a role in not just new infrastructure, but as you say, regeneration of older infrastructure. And I would completely agree with you. I think we've spent the last couple of years really understanding and getting to understand where to add value. So we're quite excited about the role that the UK that can play in that opportunity, really, and sharing that market with other countries.
And so, apart from the stuff you've already done, or the stuff you've already done that you can talk about, is what are the because I'm obsessed with these casement kind of type structures, these enclosed type of structures, and these kind of things because there's a lot of variability in size here, and they're quite difficult to transport. They're quite huge, usually, and heavy. So I really am excited about it. Is that also what you're these kind of structures? Those what you're excited about, or what else are you excited about?
Do you know, I'm excited about bringing together the sectors. So I would like to see a whole community, placemaking, homes, skills. I would like to see all three of them come together because, at the moment we're seeing them in silos. We're seeing people printing houses, we're seeing like us printing infrastructure. The real power of this is when we come together and we're printing whole communities. And I know that that's aspirational. And of course, there will be other things that are traditionally built within that space and will need to be. But how powerful is that to look in on a future placemaking where you've got different robots, different materials, all working together with humans, with local people trained up with those skills to actually be empowered in building their own places of the future. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. And I think that, I think if we can get to that type of place, then we're really doing something special with the technology.
Okay, well, that's a wonderful. I think that's a wonderful sentiment, and to look at that. I think what you guys are doing are wonderful as an integrator as well. I mean, what have been the toughest things for you guys? What's been really difficult? Was it, talking to local councils, trying to find the right supplier? What have been the real difficult things for you guys?
Do you know, the real difficult thing really has been the just cash flow. And it sounds a bit boring and probably a bit obvious, but we're a startup. We self funded our journey with this, and then we were got to a point where our clients could spend with us on projects. But UK's approach to investment is quite it's quite high risk for early stage startups. So it's very, very difficult to get any investors in board or any kind of funding in board at a super early stage. It's not impossible, but it's hard. And, that's been a real challenge for us. We're building a new market in the UK. There is no 3D construction printing market. So we're pushing those boundaries. We're a startup in that space that's, really managing week by week, month by month on cash flow. All of those things make you super exciting, but super high risk for investors. And so just, quite honestly, without our client backing and without the industry funding for those projects, I think we may not have been here. So that's been our biggest challenge. Everything else around that, you can work through, you can work with the right people, you can bring the industry on a journey. But if you can't get the money into the sector to keep going, then it is all going to fall over. And for us, we've had to be really agile. We've had to keep really on top of our overheads. We've had to be really collaborative with how we approach projects, and our delivery partners that I mentioned earlier have absolutely been fundamental in that with us. They get it, they get the big picture, they want to be part of that solution. I just think that we're not unique in that. There's a lot of startups in the UK that are doing amazing things, but are struggling for cash flow, for getting to that end point of being able to get over the line with investors.
Yeah, I think timing is always like, if you would be too late, no one would ever give you money, and if you're too early, this is totally the struggle of someone who's early. We've seen this in additive as well.
Yeah, and when you're creating a new industry, it's difficult to get people on board sometimes. So yeah.
It's super difficult, and but what an opportunity. And the early adopters is, I don't know if that's a phrase you use where you guys are, but for us, we talk about early adopters in the UK. Yeah. And, those that get it really get it. And those that then want to take confidence from the early adopters are starting to just come on behind them. And then the rest of the industry will follow. And, whatever we've got early adopters, we've got opportunity. And I think that's what we focus on. And, we're getting to a good place now. We've done a lot of the hard work. We've done the real world printing. We've answered a lot of the questions around, is this even a thing? Can you even print on the site, or can you even make these assets? And yes, you can. And we're really, really excited about the, 23 into 24 now, and starting to scale up and go even further with our plans.
Okay. That's absolutely wonderful. Hey, Natalie, thank you so much for being on the show today. This is really great, and I think we learned a lot about an area that's fairly new to us.
Thank you both so much for having me. It's a great opportunity to talk about, really honestly about the journey of 3D construction printing and our role in it. So thank you both.
And Max, thanks for being here, man.
Always fascinating time. Thank you, George.
And thank you for listening. This is another episode of the 3D Pod, and have a great day.
You've been listening to the 3D Pod. For more information on what you just heard, or to subscribe, visit www.3dprint.com or follow us at 3dprint_com.